Hello folks, how you doing? We're here for the next episode of my podcast, Reversing the Hold, with me, Mad Dog Maxx, and also me, Matt Powell. First of all, I better apologise really. This episode is over a week late. Basically, I recorded the file and I tried to upload it 3 times, and I found out that the file was corrupt. I don't exactly know what's the matter with it, but I couldn't get it to go onto YouTube. So here I am again trying to record the same bloody the same episode again. So first of all, I apologise because it's late, and second of all, I apologise that this podcast comes from the inside of my truck. I've got no other time to re-record it other than now, and I'm just hoping I just said that as the screen went up and down over a pothole. I'm just hoping that the sound quality is good enough. I'm not so sure about the picture quality with my terrible driving, but I'm hoping with this little gadget in here that I've put one ear in, that the sound quality is okay and that you can hear me really. And that's it. So I'm recording from the inside of my truck. I've just drove up to Sheffield this morning to pick up some new sound equipment that I've won on eBay for the shows and whatnot. We won't be using them tonight, but I'll get them home and test them and we'll see what's what. So now I have a couple of hours to drive home ahead of the show tonight, and so I'm going to try and record this podcast for you guys. Hopefully you can hear me okay and it's going to be all right. I don't know whether I've got the fans on too loud or whatnot. This is all new to me. I've never recorded on the go, so give me a chance, okay? If you can hear me, keep listening. So this new episode is all about my favourite opponents. I've tried to do things a little bit differently each episode, and I thought this was going to be something fun to delve into and talk to you about, my past in wrestling and my favourite people to wrestle, some of the most challenging people to wrestle, and the people I had the best matches with really. I've been wrestling for 21 years. I've wrestled, as lots of you will know, I've wrestled all over Europe. I've wrestled in America a couple of times. I've wrestled in Japan for 2 tours. Should have been 3, but the lockdown took a 3rd tour off me, but fingers crossed I'll be back in Japan soon as well. And I've wrestled a lot of people in the UK, so hopefully I can have I've got some interesting inside information for you. Just stopping at a zebra crossing. This is hilarious really, driving and talking to you. I'm not looking at the screen now. I've got my eyes firmly on the road, as you will see, so it's all safe and whatnot. I'm just recording it really so you can see me on you'll see me on a bit of a state as well. Got my hair tied back, which is not usual for me, and I've got my tan on because obviously we're wrestling at Rushall Labour Club tonight. It's virtually sold out. I think we've got about 10 tickets left. There's no point me plugging the show because this won't be going up till Saturday. But yeah, I think it's going to be a brilliant show. But forgive my my unkempt appearance. I've just swept my hair back, put my fake tan on, and come out the house to pick this equipment up. So that's where we're at really. Before I get into the meat and bones of the podcast, I suppose I'd better tell you what we've got coming up show-wise. As I record this today, this is Friday the 8th of October as I speak to you now. So we've got Rushall Labour Club tonight, which is going to be a very, very big show. But towards the end of October, we have got 2 very big shows going on. On Saturday the 30th of October, which is different because we don't normally run this venue on a Saturday, but Saturday the 30th of October, Saturday the 30th at 6 o'clock. I don't know whether you can hear my sat-nav in the background. It's telling me to turn left, which I will do. What was I saying? Saturday the 30th of October, we're at Bilston Labour Club, one of my absolutely favourite venues and one of my favourite towns. We've had a lot of big shows in Bilston with a lot of stars. We've had Blue Meanie on in wrestling Bilston, who's just been on AEW this week. So ECW, WWE star, now AEW star Blue Meanie's wrestled in Bilston. We've had Juventud Guerrera wrestle in Bilston. We've had Ultimo Dragon wrestle in Bilston. We've had a person that's going to be on my list in a bit actually, of my favourite opponents. We've had Dick Togo, ECW, WWE star wrestling Bilston. We've had some very, very big shows there. And I don't think this will be any exception really. So Saturday 30th of October, we're at Bilston Labour Club. Oh, it's the Bilston Sports and Social Club now, but you'll all know it as the Labour Club, I think, anyway. And then the Sunday straight after, Sunday the 31st of October, Halloween, we're at Kingshurst Labour Club in Solihull, Birmingham again. So they're the shows for the end of the month. Saturday the 30th of October, Bilston Sports and Social Club, formerly the Labour Club, as Sarge might say. And Sunday the 31st of October, Kingshurst Labour Club in Solihull or Birmingham. It's right in between the two, it's right on the border. On paper it's classed as Solihull, but if you speak to any of the locals, they'll say it's Birmingham. So it's in between the two, and that's our shows at the end of the month. I think that's all I got to plug. Obviously we've got the training school, kids classes, adult classes, every Wednesday night, every Saturday morning. Come along and join us. Everybody's welcome, all abilities, new starters, experienced wrestlers, don't bother us. And obviously we've got that referee seminar coming up as well, so if you've ever fancied being in the ring but not quite wearing lycra and getting dropped on the back of your head, maybe refereeing's for you. Myself and Steve Walker have got a call referee seminar coming up as well, so that might interest you. That's the plugs out the way. I've done the business part. Just driving through a lovely little area here, wooded area. Let's get down to the crux of it then. So this podcast then is about my favourite opponents. Now, I will prefix this. If you're watching this podcast and you're a fellow wrestler and you're thinking, oh, me and Matt, we've had some great matches, well, if I don't mention you, please don't take it personal whatsoever. Likewise, if you're a fan watching this and you're thinking, oh, I really enjoyed Mad Dog in this match against wrestler X, Y and Z, I hope he includes it. Again, don't get offended if I don't. I've been wrestling 21 years and I'm recording this in a truck as I drive home, getting ready for the show, and I'm going to pluck the names out of my head or out of the air of the people I've had good matches with. Now, to give you an idea, wrestling's very, very vast and it's very, very big. Now, if you ask me who my favourite wrestler is today, I'll say Ric Flair, and I'll point out 100 reasons why he's my favourite wrestler. If you ask me who my favourite wrestler is tomorrow, I might say Terry Funk or Roddy Piper or Johnny Saint or Rollerball Rocco. If you ask me in 5 minutes, I might say something different to Ric Flair, because wrestling is so vast and there's so many different styles and so many different things that I will change my answers and my mind from minute to minute as I remember different moments and different instances. So if I leave somebody off that you've maybe think that I've had a great match with, it's nothing personal against them and it's nothing personal against that match. I don't do any script, I don't do any planning of these things. I just prefer to give them out raw and let you know what's on my mind. So I'll probably miss 10 people off this list and it's nothing personal against them. And if the podcast that I already recorded on this subject, it'll be completely different to the one I record now. I can only tell you what's in my mind of my favourite opponents now, if that makes sense. If I miss you off or if I miss your favourite wrestler off, it's nothing personal. It's just 21 years is a lot of time to talk about. And not only is it 21 years, it's hundreds of matches a year as well. You know, I'd need to sit down with a pen and paper and go through my scrapbooks to the definitive list, but this ain't a definitive list or a be all and end all. It's just whatever's on the top of my head on this Friday afternoon, you know. So don't get offended if I leave you off or if I leave your favourite wrestler off, and that's it really. So I hope you can hear me okay. Favourite opponents, I should probably go back to the beginning or to more or less the beginning. And I can't really talk about my favourite opponents without mentioning Superstar Carlos, or Carl Corporate as he was when I first met him, or Carl Misery as he became years later when he changed his gimmick up a little bit, or just Carlos, or Superstar Carlos, or Carlos Fandango, or whichever alias he chooses to go by now. When I first encountered him, I was green behind the ears. I knew absolutely nothing, but one thing I did know, he'd been wrestling 2 years before me, or maybe a touch longer, I'm not sure, but he'd already been wrestling before me and he'd already established himself as a very good wrestler in a very short amount of time. And one thing I did know, even though I was green behind the ears and knew nothing, barely knew how to lock up properly, is that he was always the best wrestler in the room. And I gravitated towards him because I wanted to be the best and I wanted to learn from the best. And other than our coach Steve Logan, obviously with a world of experience and a great background and whatnot, Carlos was the best wrestler in the room, in almost any room he ever went into, you know. And not only that, but he gave this young, green, idiotic, ungrateful, too fast, daft wrestler the best matches of his early career. And he did. He gave me those amazing matches. I didn't know much about him at the time because Carl was wrestling a broomstick. He was just getting good matches out of anybody, like he does now. I just happened to be that broomstick for those couple of months, those couple of years. He taught me a ridiculous amount, not necessarily on purpose, just because he was literally amazing. I'll tell you now that if you look Carlos up, superstar Carlos up, he's better than 90% of the WWE roster now. I know people that are on the WWE roster now that can't understand that Carlos hasn't made it. Some people will call him this, that and the other, and says this and says that and says the other. I guarantee they're the people that don't know him properly or haven't took the time to get to know him. He's one of the most kind, generous, wonderful people I've ever met. But honestly, we're talking about wrestling experience now. He's one of the best wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with, whether it was in my early career that I'm talking about now, because I'm trying to do it in time order, or if I wrestled him last year or the year before, which I did. He's simply one of the best wrestlers in the world, not the country. He just happens to not wrestle all that much. But talent-wise, he's better than most the WWE and AEW roster put together, and I'm not exaggerating that. He can be his own worst enemy at times, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He's just allergic and immune to arse kissing. So that's a handicap for you in professional wrestling, because your face has got to fit, and you've got to move in the right circles, and you've got to pucker up to the right people at times. And I'll be honest, Carl, he's immune to that, and I quite admire him for it. But let's just talk about ability and the measure of the man. One of the best wrestlers that I've ever been in the ring with, better than most of the full-time under contract wrestlers today, and I'm not exaggerating that. He's pure talent. And if I did a list and I didn't mention of my favourite opponents and I didn't mention Carlos, I would be doing a great disservice to the man. And that's it really. I'll be honest, I could do a whole podcast on Carl and the good times that we had together at the start of a career, or when we get back together now every now and again. I could do a whole podcast on all the practical jokes we pulled, because we were two young teenage punks on the road finding ourselves together, and we pulled a lot of pranks, and we were like high school dropouts pulling pranks every show. We had a laugh. I could do a whole podcast on him, but I'll just do these 10 minutes on him and say that, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, one of my greatest opponents, and without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with, or one of the, he's just amazing. And it's a tragedy that he never made it on a national or international scale. But is it a tragedy? Because I know he's very, very happy. He's happy in his relationship. He's happy in the matches that he's doing now. He's happy in his coaching, and he's in phenomenal shape. And he seems to be at peace with his surroundings. So it's not that tragic really, because the man's happy and the man's doing well for himself, and he can still get in the ring and steal the show whenever he fancies it as well. So yeah, shout out to you, Carl. Probably wouldn't be the wrestler I am today without you. So I've got to mention you really. And that's it. So another one that I should mention in a similar vein, although he wasn't really a massive opponent of mine, in that he was more of a tag partner, but we did wrestle each other probably hundreds of times as well, was a bloke called Johnny the Body, Johnny Rose. Probably didn't have the physical attributes that Carl had. Carl could drop kick an 8-foot man's hat off his head, and he could leapfrog over an 8-foot man as well. Johnny the Body, or Johnny Rose as he's called now, doesn't have those physical attributes. But what I say about John is, if you chop the top of his head off and looked inside, there's not a brain, there's a wrestling ring. So he understands wrestling very, very well. He understands psychology very, very well. And what he did for a young teenage me was slow me right down, because I was far too quick, and I didn't sell things quick for long enough, and I got up too quick and I moved too quick, and he slowed me down by default of his very natural style. and his early understanding of wrestling, which has only improved over the years. So yeah, I must mention John in that as well. Probably wrestled him over 100, 150 times, but we've probably had double that in tag team matches over the years. Maybe he belongs on the tag team podcast, I don't know, but be a bit bad of me not to mention him, I think, because of the development that I got wrestling against him. Yeah, so that's that one. Another one that I must mention from the early years, but in all fairness, all the way through my career, just in and out of it throughout my career, he's the Rock and Roll Express, Blondie Barrett. Bob, as you PWL fans will know, still wrestles regularly for PWL. I think he's our longest reigning Great British champion, and he still pops up and wrestles for us now in his 60s, and that's because in his 40s, when I encountered him, he was the first, I want to say, veteran, first World of Sport legend, first British wrestling icon, or however you want to frame it. He was the first one that I wrestled that didn't just take great sadistic, masochistic pleasure in beating the shit out of me. Don't get me wrong, he wrestled me hard and he worked me hard, but he also took the time to educate me and make me look good and advise me as well. He's the first one that didn't punch me as hard as he could in the head. Instead, he kind of educated me and made me, you know, a much better wrestler. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I cut up because somebody found me, and they couldn't find me at a more annoying moment because I was in my flow then with that podcast, or I felt I was anyway. I might watch it back later and think it was terrible. But somebody gave me a call and threw me off my stride. I've took the call, I've put myself on aeroplane mode, so nobody will interrupt us now, and I can carry on. I think I was talking about Bob Barrett, weren't I? Yeah, basically, he took the time to educate me. I got to wrestle him a whole lot. And I don't even think he knew he was educating me at the time. He was just giving little bits of advice like he does now. But it was precious advice because he just knows the job so very well. And I became a better wrestler because of it. And that's why I like to keep him around PWL now. Not to mention, obviously, he makes any show better that he's on. And he gets booed out the building when he's a villain and cheered out the building when he's a babyface. Obviously, he warrants the spot. But what I think of first and foremost is the fact that he will educate my young wrestlers and he will help my trainees exactly like he used to help me. Fuck you as well. Sorry, bit of road rage. Just been given the wanker sign. Not sure why. Not sure what I've done. There you go. I should probably edit that out, shouldn't I? But yeah, Bob's just a wonderful human being, but in the ring, which is what I'm talking about, one of my very best opponents, because I learned so much from him, but then years later I got the confidence to be able to give him the odd suggestion, oh Bob, do you mind if we put this into the match, or do you mind if we try that? And he never ever looked down on me or belittled me or anything like that. He would tell me if an idea was awful, or you know, if I was making a bad decision with my career or whatever, but he would always be supportive, and I would still go for him for advice now. So yeah, they're my early three anyway. They're the three. Obviously there was many more. I was having hundreds of matches a year at the time. Obviously there was more people that I could mention, but I've only got an hour or so of this podcast, and I can only pluck what's on the top of my head really, and that's it. I can fast forward maybe 3 or 4 years. This will be the test now. We're getting on the motorway. I wonder if you'll hear me. I reckon you still will. I reckon it'll be okay. Yeah, so we fast forward 3 or 4 years from the very, very start of my career. And I started wrestling. Just get on the motorway. There we go. Started wrestling in South Wales an awful lot. I wrestled for a promotion called PPW, which was Power Pro Wrestling or Pro Power Wrestling. It's hard to remember all the names of these promotions nowadays. I wrestled for something called South Wales Championship Wrestling. Wrestled one called WWO. But the big one for me personally, and the one that meant something because it had a bit of an ECW feel for it, or a feel of being the underdog but ending up with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of supporters or whatever, was Celtic wrestling. All of them were special to me at the time because I was wrestling almost exclusively in Wales at the time. I was taking holiday camp bookings in the week, but all of my town shows ended up being in Wales, and that's just how it worked out. I used to stay down there an awful lot and party down there an awful lot, and started heavily drinking down there an awful lot, and God knows what else. And I encountered a wrestler called Cayman, Carl Griffiths, his proper name is. If you look him up on social media, Cayman, he's got a podcast, a very, very successful podcast. He has quite some big guests and celebrities on it nowadays. So check him out, search Cayman or Cayman Podcast or something like that. I'm sure you'll find him. He's an artist, he's a musician, he's a wrestler. I don't know what he can't do, to be fair. But what's funny about Carl is he's one of my favourite opponents over the years. But we didn't start off as friends. We started off not liking each other, really. Started talking to each other, and first of all, if you look at us, we're an odd couple because he's about 6'6" and I'm about 5'6", and he towers over me, and he's a tall, thin lad, and I'm short and stocky. So even like standing us next to each other, we look a bit weird. And we got talking backstage, and he was telling me all the moves he likes to do. And he was saying, I like to clothesline someone over the top and flip myself over to put a bit more damage on it, a bit like Cactus Jack. And he would say, I do the double arm DDT, and I do a T-bone suplex. And he was listing his moves. And I was standing there thinking, he's listing my moves here. And I thought that one of the lads had given him, my moveset to remember, and he was ribbing me. I thought, cheeky fucker, he's never met me before, and he's already trying to pull a wrestling practical joke on me. And I think to a degree he thought the same. We didn't know what to make of each other. And I think what it boils down to actually is we've got our differences, like I say, little and large and all this kind of stuff, and we're very different people, but also very similar in lots of ways as well. Like I said, we had the same moveset when we first met. I mean, even like a couple of years ago, without talking to each other and without knowing, we got virtually the same tattoos put on our knuckles. He's got the playing cards on his knuckles, and so have I. And we're still very alike, really. I was on a show with him maybe a month or two ago, and it was like I saw him yesterday. He's a wonderful, wonderful kid. But in the ring at the start, we didn't like each other. And we used to lay it in a little bit with each other, but I tell you what, love him or hate him at the time, I very, very much love him now. But I'll be honest, for the early part of my career, they probably wouldn't hold up now, because obviously you're always improving and you're always getting better, and you're always judge yourself. And a match you had last week you might not like compared to a match you have tomorrow. But at the time, for my very, very early career, I was proud of those matches. They were hard hitting, they were very physical. They started to have a good structure to them, and Carl Cayman, he goes on my list. He's got to, really. I used to relish driving up to Wales to wrestle him. Sometimes I'd sit in the car as if I was going to battle. I knew it was going to hurt, and I knew I was going to hurt him, but I knew we'd have the crowd in the palm of our hands, and I knew we'd have a nice loud reaction. And to be honest with you, I relished the challenge. It was beefy, and we had some good bouts, and hopefully we'll have one more, I reckon, maybe two more, a couple more. He's just started taking bookings again, Cayman has, so watch this space, you might see him about. And with mentioning Cayman and mentioning South Wales, I've got to mention an ECW legend, a WCW superstar, a former WWE superstar, as one of my favourite opponents. And you might think, well, what's South Wales got to do with an international American star? And simply put, it's where my feud started with him and where I wrestled him a bunch of times. I'll set the story, really. I suppose what this podcast is about is me telling stories and talking on the road, so I'll try and set the scene. Basically, I was in the Midlands. I was at home. Well, I was in the gym, which was a few minutes from my home. I was working out, and the promoter, which is Cayman, so this is why this all links together. Cayman phoned me up, and he sounded quite upset. He was a bit worried and a bit stressed, and I couldn't work out what was wrong at first. I was just, waiting to hear the punchline because I could tell there was something up. And that night I was supposed to wrestle Joey Mercury. I don't know if you remember him. He used to tag with Johnny Nitro or Johnny Morrison or whatever you call him, and Melina used to manage him. They were called M&M. They were a decent tag team back in like that early 2000s era. They had some big tag team runs, and they were very, very over. Well, anyway, I was the Celtic wrestling champion at the time, and I was supposed to defend the belt against Joey Mercury that night. And I'll be honest, I wasn't all that thrilled about it. So he represented to me an indie wrestler. I thought he was going to want to do this, that and the other. On reflection, looking back, he's actually very, very talented. And I'd probably be a bit wrong about him, but I just perceived him as an indie wrestler, and I thought the match wouldn't mesh. As I've got older and I've watched a bit of his work, I think he'd be a great opponent. But at the time, I was looking forward to it for the exposure that it would have given me, but I wasn't overly excited. I was just of the opinion of, what's this going to be about? Will he want to fight? Will he want to work? Will he want to have a good match? Will he want to sulk? You always think these things when you're going to wrestle an international star. So I wasn't overly enthusiastic about the bout. I would have met him first and made my mind up then. But Carl informed me that he'd missed his flight. I don't know whether there was a problem with the flight, or he slept in, or the flight was like, I don't know the situation. I can't remember. Cayman's probably would be better to tell you on his podcast, so you should check it out. But yeah, he says, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And I got the phone to me like this, it was before hands-free and all that kind of stuff. I'm older than you think. And he goes, the bad news is Joey Mercury can't make it. And I thought, okay, I can live with that, not a problem, less pressure. And he says, but the good news is you're wrestling Tracy Smothers. And I muffled the phone on my chest. It was one of those phones on a cord. I muffled the phone on my chest, and I was like, yes. And then I played it cool to Carl on the phone. I was like, yeah, that's not a problem, mate. I'll be there, no worries. I'll see you at 5 o'clock, phone down. Fucking hell. I was absolutely ecstatic. Tracy Smothers, ECW legend, WCW, WWE star, All Japan Wrestling star. He'd wrestled all over the world. Absolute veteran. I'd already been on a bunch of shows with him and met him. He makes a point of watching every match from the curtain. It's like having a permanent coach on the road with you. I knew that I was going to be wrestling a gentleman. I knew that he was going to be gracious. I knew that I was going to learn a load. I knew it'd be a tough night. He had hands like fucking spades. I knew it was going to be a tough night. But in my young career as it was then, I knew I was going to learn an awful lot. And by God, I did. I ended up doing a 3 or 4 match series with him in Cardiff. He came to Wolverhampton as part of the feud as well. I defended the Celtic belt against him there. For any of you PWL fans watching or listening in, that was the first time Elise ever saw me wrestle. I arranged for a front row seat for her to watch me wrestle, and that first time she ever saw me wrestle was against Tracy Smothers in Wolverhampton. The funny thing is, I didn't tell her I was a wrestler. I told her to come along and watch the show, and I'd meet her halfway through, and I'd be there and watch the second half with her. And then the second half come by, and she was texting me, where are you? Thought we were going to watch the wrestling together, blah blah blah. And each text got a little bit more angry, like I was standing her up or something. And I was just texting her saying, wait, just wait, I'll be there in 5 minutes. I said, don't go anywhere, because Tracy Smothers is in the main event, superstar this, superstar that. So I managed to get her to stay till the main event, even though she's fuming with me. I can see her through the curtain. I can see steam coming out her ears. She was that angry. Thought she'd, her mate had asked her out for a drink and I'd not bothered turning up. But then my music hit and I walk out in a pair of black spandex trunks, ready to wrestle a superstar. So yeah, that's the first time she ever seen me wrestle. But back to Tracy Smothers. He was just a genius, and he was an international, bona fide, professional genius, and I knew I'd learn a lot from him, and I did learn a lot from him. I was still a bit green behind the ears, even though I was finding myself a little bit more, and I needed slowing down and I needed seasoning, and Tracy provided the perfect amount of seasoning. He just helped me along the way, and he was just just fantastic, really good opponent. I knew I'd learn a lot from him, but I didn't know how much, and it was ridiculous. So Tracy Smothers, check him out. Passed away last year. Rest in peace, Tracy. Hell of a wrestler, hell of a talent, hell of a coach, hell of a mentor. Just ridiculous, just brilliant opponent. So I've got to get that one out there. Another opponent that I'll mention in a similar vein to Tracy, somebody I learned a lot from, and it made me more of the wrestler that I am today. He was more of a coach to me, really, although I did wrestle him many times, and a lot of you people would have heard me go on about him. His name was Taffy Jenkins, John Jenkins. He was a wrestler from Leicester. He wrestled in the old World of Sport days. He was on telly somewhat and wrestled all over the country, did well for himself, and he'd been retired 9 years, and he was watching a show in his hometown of Leicester. It was a Jack Taylor show. He was one of the old traditional promoters in England that I used to work for, and myself and Johnny the Body, who I mentioned earlier, and a chap called Sal that we used to travel with, were all on that card. And Taffy Jenkins took a bit of a liking to the three of us. And essentially, because he took a liking to the three of us, he came out to retirement to wrestle the three of us and to teach us a little bit more. And he ended up coaching us and coming on the road with us, and we all learnt a lot from him. And Taffy, without a shadow of a doubt, again, just check my diesel. Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm not going to crash. I'm not going to break down. Taffy, we learnt an awful lot from him, and I did personally, and I can't not put him on the list. I think I'm rushing through these. I hope I'm not rushing. I hope I'm taking enough time. At the same time, I've got a lot of people in my head that I want to give time to. So if you think I'm rushing them, I apologise. I've never drove a truck and done a podcast before in my life, so it's even more on the fly than usual when I'm drinking beer. Another one, he's a former WWE star and a former TNA Impact star. But you may or may not have heard of him. He was a bit of an enhancement talent for the WWE. He was very much, he came up with Edge and Christian and Rhino. He was in that stable of Canadian wrestlers, and he wrestled for the WWE as Just Joe. I'll be honest, I respect the man a lot, but that was a bit of a shit gimmick, and it weren't his fault. What could he do with it? His job was to go backstage, shit stir a little bit, and then like wrestlers like Big Show would go, "Who are you?" And he'd go, "I'm Joe, Just Joe," and he'd walk off. I mean, you're not going to become a superstar like that, are you? You know, it's not his fault. He was just given a shit gimmick. But the truth is, he was one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with. One of the best. He's a wrestler's wrestler. All the wrestlers acknowledge that he's one of the best, and he is one of the best. To the point, he could make people look that good that when Jim Ross was the head of talent relations, he would say to people, "Oh, send me a tape of your work, but don't send me a tape of you watching wrestling against Joe Legend," which is his independent name. Just Joe was his WWE name. "Don't send me a tape of you against Joe Legend because he can make anybody look good." Well, that's fine, but hire him then. Hire the guy that can make someone look good. I'll never understand the internal politics of the upper echelon wrestling, because I see some guys get a contract who've been wrestling 12 months and they're fucking rotten. And they're rotten when they join the big companies, and they're rotten when they leave them. And I never understand how they got the job. They must be good at that. I don't know. And then you've got wrestlers like Carlos on a national level, or Just Joe on a international level, who don't really get a look in, and I'll never understand that. Another place you might remember him from, if you remember, ITV did a show called Celebrity Wrestling. And the only thing wrestling about it was that Roddy Piper hosted it, D'Lo Brown coached the blue team, and Just Joe, aka Joe Legend, coached the other team, the red team. So you might remember him from that, really. But I wrestled him in South Wales for one of the big promotions that was around South Wales back then. And I was, again, green behind the ears, didn't really know what I was doing. And he dragged me through my first 40-minute match. And I was blowing, and it killed me, and he got me through it because the promoter needed 40 minutes. So he got 40 minutes out of me, and I remember afterwards we were in the jacuzzi after the show backstage. We were chilling out. It was very posh very posh venue. We were in the jacuzzi, and I just picked his black brains dry afterwards. We were sitting there, and I was like, well, what about this? What about that? You know, and what about this? And he was very, very gracious with his time after the show. He didn't need to be. He didn't need to be gracious, but he was. And he taught me an awful lot. Good bloke, very good match, very, very, very good opponent, which is what the podcast is about, ain't it, really? So, just Joe E. Legend. Look him up, very, very talented. Never quite got the career he deserved. Should have got a better career than he did get. But I'm not running him down. He's a professional, full-time wrestler, and he's made his living out of wrestling, and he's paid his bills out of wrestling. I just so happen to think that he should have been a world champion, and he should have been on pay-per-views and stuff. That's all, really. I'm not running his career down in the slightest. I'm just putting him on my list because I think he's brilliant. Trying to think of who else now. I'll tell you another very, very good wrestler, and you wouldn't think it because of the gimmick he got from the WWE. Another very good opponent of mine. I don't know if you remember a guy called Eugene. He did a bit of, got to come off the motorway, hang on, just get in this lane. He did a bit, he had a bit of a controversial gimmick, really. He was round in the early to mid 2000s, and I don't know the best way to describe this. He had like a backwards gimmick, you know, like a mental retardation or something. I don't know the PC term for it. When I was a kid, it was the Spastic Society, and you said that, but then the word spastic become an insult, so then it become the Scope Society and all this. And there's so many words you can use for it, and so many words become derogatory. And I don't want to come across derogatory at all. But he did a mentally handicapped gimmick, and you wouldn't be allowed to do that gimmick now, which is a good thing, and I'm glad, really. But at the same time, he did it and got himself over. But again, a little bit like the Just Joe gimmick, it limited him, because the man behind the gimmick, Nick Dinsmore, if you look him up, as LVW wrestler under Jim Cornette, was one of the best wrestlers going of that day, of that era. And then they saddled him with a mentally handicapped gimmick, and for all the will in the world, they're never going to push that gimmick to be a world champion or a serious threat. And that's a shame, really, because underneath the gimmick was one of the best wrestlers going, and I found that out firsthand. At the time, he'd just been released from the WWE, and to give you an idea of how long he'd been out the WWE, towards the end of his run, he had a run-in with DX, and they gunked him with a load of green paint. They dropped a load of green paint on him. I can't remember the segment, but a load of my mates told me about it. And then when I'm wrestling him, I put one on him, boom, I put him on his arse, and I'm just going to pick him up, and I pass his boots, and I look down, and he's got all the DX green paint all over his lovely white boots still. So it can't have been too much long after his WWE release I wrestled him. And he'd gone back to LVW, and he was coaching there and helping out there, and he was wrestling on the circuit to kind of prove that he still had it, and hopefully get a new job and all that kind of thing. And by God, was he a good opponent. He was good, he was just smooth and slick. I think the match is on the internet, actually. It's one of the few matches you get to see me as a full-fledged villain, you know, a rule breaker. I'm winding the Welsh crowd up and I'm stomping on Eugene's head. But honestly, one of the best wrestlers I've been in the ring with. Check the match out, see what you think. But it's all the little inside bits that he did that were good. The bits that you don't quite see as a fan, but it helps you as a wrestler. And it helps move you along, or move you into that part of the match, or stop you from doing that. He knew how to coach you. And sorry, move the camera then. Eugene, Nick Dinsmore's just phenomenal. And one of the biggest compliments I ever got is after the bout, we shook hands and we had a hug and all of that, you know, kiss and make up after punching each other in the head for half hour. And he told me how he was helping out coach at LVW again, and he asked me to come over, and I really, really appreciated that. It was really nice, and I was thinking about it, and I'd already been to America once, and I did end up going back as well. But LVW just didn't line up for me. I ended up meeting Elise and changed the little bits that I was doing, and I stopped travelling for a couple of years just to kind of settle down and reset, because I was burning the candle at both ends, and it didn't come off really. But the fact that he asked me to go over and saw enough in me to recommend me to go over was a huge compliment, and I took it on board, and it gave me a big boost, you know. But yeah, Eugene, Nick Dinsmore. The Match with Me is on YouTube, but I'm sure you've all heard of him. Just a phenomenal wrestler. Another wrestler I'll give some props to as well. You might not have heard of him. He's a Midlands wrestler. I'm not sure if he wrestles now or not. I hope he does, because he's a good hand. But he's a wrestler called Dan Ryder. He's from down south. He's from like down south somewhere. You can tell he's got like a southern accent, but he lives in Wolverhampton with his lovely missus. And me and Dan Ryder, we were in a feud in Birmingham. Used to be a promotion who run the old Irish Centre in Digbeth. And my dad's boxed in the Irish Centre in Digbeth, and he says, like, when he seen me build there, he was like, "Oh, watch out there, son." He says the crowd are wild. There's always fights in the crowd, and it's mad. He says you'll have a good atmosphere, but watch your back. And I says, "Dad, it's wrestling. It'll be all right, you know. It won't be like that nowadays. It's 2005 or whatever it was. Relax, Dad." Well, 5 minutes into my first match there was a big fight in the crowd, and it was exactly how my dad described it. It was dingy and gritty. The promotion at the time had a bit of an ECW vibe to it, really. It was fucking wild. It was good. And me and Dan Ryder and his missus, who managed him, we were in this feud, and we raised hell, man. Sorry, just going over some potholes again. We did a lot of good stuff. We did bits, you know, there was bits where, like, I put his missus through a table just to be a prick, and I kidnapped his missus the once. We threw her in a car and drove off from the show, and 200 fans followed the car down the road while I'm hanging out the sunroof. My mate's driving, we've got her in the boot screaming. I'm hanging out the sunroof, he's jumped on the top of the car, and we punching each other like mad. Through the sunroof as we drive off. It'd be illegal, probably. The police would probably have us if we did it now with Facebook and Twitter and all that. We only had MySpace back then. It didn't really go online. But yeah, we had a really good feud. Like I say, his missus was an integral part of that feud, Becky Ryder, because she was up for anything and she had some bollocks, you know, like she didn't mind me slamming her or throwing her through a table or kidnapping her and stuff. And Dan had a wonderful energy. He was a high flyer. He could do a 450 and a moonsault, and he'd do this kick thing and moonsault on me in one smooth motion. It was easy to wrestle him, really, and we beat the absolute piss out of each other. I wrestled a different style to I wrestle now, and the feud finished in a big, massive cage match in Aston University. And when I say massive cage, it was like 20 foot high. This cage was. It was like an Hell in a Cell. It was massive. I'll put some pictures up of it if I can get hold of it. But yeah, me and Dan Ryder, we tangoed a lot in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, late 2010s, somewhere around then. And we tangled a lot, and we had chain matches and tables matches, hardcore matches, cage matches. I bled like a stuffed pig in the cage, but he was one of my favourite opponents, and we had a good feud, a good solid feud, and he drew some steady houses. We kept selling the next show out and the next show out, and I was very proud of that little feud there, to be honest. And yeah, that was good. And then progressing forwards a few years, I had some steady opponents, so Cade Callis, Marcus Cole, Matt Mensa, and those three I kind of wrestled in a similar kind of era, all overlapping at the same time. And what was unique about them three, more so Tom and Cade and Mensa, but also Mark to a degree as well on some elements, I helped coach Mark, or at least helped develop him after his initial coaching. And I coached Cade Callis and Matt Mensa how to wrestle, or at least largely coached them, and had a big hand in their early development. So this was the start of me wrestling against people that I taught then. Obviously we've moved on a few years as I'm taking you through my opponents and who I like to wrestle. And Marcus, and to a bigger extent, because I had more of a hand in their training, Cade Callis and Matt Mensa. It was like a different dynamic, because they were the first wrestlers that I'd helped coach and help mentor, and then they'd gone away and wrestled a few other people that had matches here and matches there and matches there, and then they started wrestling me, and that was very rewarding, because not only were we having good matches, and we were having some bloody fun matches, I'd helped coach them, and it was a weird feeling. I'd not had that feeling now. I have that feeling a lot now when I wrestle the likes of Carl or Danny or Leon, who I'll talk about much later, if I've still got the time to talk about him, because he certainly belongs on the list. But Marcus Cole, and like I say, to a larger extent, Kate Callis and Matt Mensah, that was the first experience I had of that. You know, they'd came to me and asked me how to get into wrestling and this, that and the other, and then I'd help coach them, and then I'd watch them wrestle the new guys, and I'd give them advice, and I'd help them along. And then maybe 18 months later, we were like on top of the bill or in good positions or featured positions anyway, and we were having good matches, and that was very, very rewarding, because I'd seen them, you know, from day one when they weren't even wrestlers. Marcus Cole went to school with my brother, for instance. He went to the same school as me. I'd seen them from when they weren't wrestlers to being new wrestlers, to finding their feet, to then, like, you know, having 30-40 minute matches with them. It was very, very rewarding. So that was the start of that, and I've got to give a big shout out to all them, really. Just great wrestlers, all very, very different in their own right. Marcus was a high flyer. Cade's a big, you know, 6'4+ guy. He's a power guy, but he can move like a cat, the bastard. And Matt Mensah was just pure power. He was on the chemical enhancements at the time, and to be fair, he has a lot of knowledge of the human anatomy. He's a fully qualified personal trainer, and what he doesn't know about the inside of a gym, you don't need to know. And he was just a physical specimen, and again, very athletic like Cade. So the three of them, for completely different reasons, were a joy to wrestle and very, very easy to wrestle. So I've got to include those three, really. I tell you another one of my favourite opponents, and you might not have heard of him, but there's a great story to go with this. A really funny story, actually. There's a promotion in Swindon that's run by a guy called Dave Sharp. If you're up to date on your social media, you'll just see that 4FW have closed yesterday. They closed their doors, and that's a great shame, really. They're a good promotion. They put on a lot of shows, and I did a lot of work for them, and I enjoyed working for them. I made some friends that I will consider lifelong friends. People like JD Knight, who still wrestles now, and there's other people down there as well, like the Saint and Matt Lomax, and other people that I think are absolutely brilliant. Ben Lee and Nadia Sapphire, and people that I met through 4FW that I'll never ever forget. Particularly JD, I've got a big soft spot for him. He's a very, very good human being, and also belongs on this list, actually. But I'll do the Dave Sharp story because it's a funny story, really. It was back to when I was wrestling mostly in Wales, and I did mention earlier that I was a bit cocky and a bit stubborn and probably a bit arrogant at the time, and I had a bit of a reputation for myself. And JD, who I've always liked, to try to get me to wrestle for 4FW in before, and because he had a hand in booking it or running it in the early years or something. And what I now know is Dave Sharp had always resisted bringing me in, because he'd heard about me, and he'd heard about my bad reputation and all that kind of thing. And as it turned out, I was the South Wales Championship Wrestling Champion. It's a mouthful, ain't that? South Wales Championship Wrestling Champion. It was actually even longer than that. It was the South Wales Championship Wrestling, which was the promotion, Southern Heavyweight Champion. So it's a right mouthful, but South Wales was what we called the promotion, and that's where it was. And I was the champion at the time, and I was going to be wrestling Dave Sharp, but I was opening the show, bizarrely, because I was the champion, because I had to drive, I don't know, say 90 minutes across the border to wrestle in Evesham on a different show. So we were opening the show, and I was on first, defending the title against Dave Sharp. And he wasn't coming over to plan with me. He was probably thinking, oh, you know, I've heard Matt's arrogant, I've heard he's a bit of a prick, I don't really want to plan with him, you know. So he was probably avoiding me. And me, being stupid, I was thinking, oh, we've got plenty of time. I'll get changed first, then I'll go over. And I'd already said hello, I'd done the polite thing, but I was thinking, oh, well, we've got half hour, I'll be all right. So at 5 to 7, I went over and I says, Dave, I'll just finish putting my boot on and we'll have a chat, mate. We've got a good 35 minutes, we'll be all right. And the promoter at this point shouts over and goes, no, you've got 5 minutes. The show starts at 7. And I thought, oh, for fuck's sake. So Dave probably thought I weren't coming over to him because I was a stuck-up fucker. which weren't true. I thought I had plenty of time. I probably thought Dave weren't coming over to me because I was, you know, I probably thought he was thinking the same as me and all that kind of stuff. And I had 5 minutes and I still only had one boot on, so I said to Dave, I'll see you out there, it'll be all right. And he laughed and walked into the corridor to, you know, where we were making the entrance. Luckily, being second, I got to enter second, being the champion. So I had time to put my boots on. And we got out there and we did a 30-minute match. Just out there, just feeling each other out. Nothing predetermined about it, nothing planned or anything like that. I was going to be polite to him and ask him if he was okay or whatnot, but I didn't get the chance. So I said it in the ring, locked up. How you doing? You all right? Yeah, fuck you. Boom, you know, boom. And that's how the match started. And 30 minutes later, we finished and got backstage, and we both all welted up, and we smashed each other to bits. And he says, "Oh, that was a great match. Thank you. I thought you were shit." That was his exact sentence. "That was a great match. I thought you were shit." And I says, "Oh, most people seem to think that, but there you go." And he says, "What are you doing next week? Can you come and wrestle for 4FW?" "Yes, I can. Thank you very much." Shook his hand, and then I had like a, I don't know, 15-year run at 4FW or whatever. I don't know what it was. It was many years anyway, and I had a lot of fun there. Wrestled a lot of good, talented people there, and that all come from that one match where he thought I was a prick, and we had 2 minutes to say hello and then get in the ring and knock hell out of each other. We ended up wrestling each other an awful lot after that because the promoter liked the match, so we booked a load of rematches. Then other promoters liked the match, so they booked it everywhere, you know. And yeah, Dave Schultz, one of my good opponents. Got to bring him up. Yeah, I can't do it without him. But Dave, I know you won't watch this. I know you won't hear this, but I've heard you've packed up, and that's a shame. Wrestling won't be as good without you being all ratty and angry before a show and doing your nervous cough. Your show with Rey Mysterio and Alberto Del Rio as the main event was one of the biggest and best shows I'd ever worked on. Some of your shows you did with New Japan and All Japan Talent was some of the best shows I'd ever worked on. And yeah, you were a good opponent, so you get on the list. I hope you're still as angry, and I hope you still got the nervous cough. Who else shall I talk about? I have got a little list here, but I can't see it, so I'm looking up at it and got to look at the road and make sure you can still hear me, that I'm being recorded. I might as well talk about JD Knight. This is a mad one, really, because when JD started wrestling, he wasn't called JD Knight like he is now. I mean, he wrestles for PWL every now and again still, and JD Knight, and I think his last match for PWL was him tagging with Lomax and Gordon against me and the Nasty Boys. So it's not that long ago. He was around a couple of years ago, and he'll be around again. I saw him a couple of months ago in Birmingham, and we had a meal and a nice catch up. That was nice. Good lad. But yeah, with JD, he's my age, and we have a lot in common, but we're also very, very different people. He's calm and laid back and sensible, and I'm nervous and angsty and far from sensible. But he's a very, very talented wrestler, and a very, very good influence on me. Like I say, he's calm. He's a calming influence. But not only that, he pushes me. He'll make me do things I don't want to do, and I'll tell him they're going to fail, and they never do, and they always work. He'll push me to try this move, or he'll push me to try that move, or he'll push me to do that match or do that match, and I'll resist him right up until when I do it, and then I'll try it, and it's amazing. And although he's my age, and I think we've been wrestling more or less the same time, because of his naturally calm persona and his just his wonderful personality, he's almost like a coach, even though he's not my coach, and we've got a similar experience. He'll say, try that and do that and shut the fuck up, and he won't swear a lot, but he's a wonderful person. But yeah, one of my best opponents, because he very much knows how to get the best out of me, and he'll also tell me when to shut up, and he's one of the few people who'll tell me to shut up and I won't want to start a fight immediately. He calms me down because of how calm he is. If I make a stupid statement, he'll tell me it's stupid. If I say something good, he'll tell me it's good. He's very, very honest, and I've always found that calming, and I can't do my favourite opponents without mentioning JD Knight. I've got to mention him. So that's that, really. moving on to more modern times now, I'm kind of kicking on in my career. I've probably skipped loads of people and loads of matches and loads of years, and I do apologise if I'm missing out one of your favourite wrestlers, or if indeed you're one of those wrestlers. As you can tell, I'm doing this while I'm driving a truck home. You know, it's all ad hoc, so I'm just doing what I can, really. But I'll tell you two that have come to mind, just sticking in my head. One of them is a guy called Dick Togo. Again, we booked him through Dave Sharp. Dave had a good working relationship with several Japanese promotions at one time. And Dick Togo, he was in the original Kaientai promotion. He was in Kaientai, the faction in WWE. He was involved in the whole Val Venis, choppy pee, poof. He was around then. So he was in the Kaientai faction. He was in ECW. He was in the BWO, I believe, with Blue Meanie, who I think I mentioned earlier, and Stevie Richards and Nova, and an overall Japanese wrestling legend. And I wrestled him on a rainy Thursday night in Bilston. It was the only day he had free on the tour. We booked a Thursday. I wrestled him, and 4 hours after the flight, I was on a plane with Elise to go to Spain. So it was a right mad dash. But he was just very, very technical and very, very gifted. And he was one of the first Japanese, I think he might have been the first Japanese wrestler I tangled with in the ring. And that was an eye-opener and interesting, because I had one preconceived notion of what Japanese wrestlers were, and Dick Togo wasn't that. So it was very, very interesting, but a very good opponent who I learnt a lot off. And I'll tell you one that you'll know, and the story again, this has got a funny story attached to it. It's kind of disrespectful, but I don't mean any disrespect behind it, because I admire the wrestler a lot, and I've grown to greatly admire his work. But the truth of the matter is, I'd never heard of him when I'd come to wrestle him. So that's probably where I mean the disrespect. I don't mean it disrespectful. For you guys that know me, you know that I watch an awful lot of wrestling, but it's all from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, and that's where I watch my wrestling, and that's where my wrestling tastes inhabit, you know, whether it be something between Vern Gagne and Lou Thesz, or Hulk Hogan and I don't know, anyone really. It's I like classic wrestling, so I don't watch modern wrestling, and I don't know a lot of the indie darlings, as they call them, or the up and comers, or the next big thing, or I don't know what they call them nowadays, but I don't know them. It's no disrespect. And this particular young man called Johnny Gargano, I'm sure you've heard of him. I had a show in Rush Hall, which oddly is where I'm wrestling tonight. I had a show in Rush Hall, and a good friend of mine, a promoter from Stevenage, he got in touch with me, and he says, oh, you've got a show in a few weeks, do you mind booking this Johnny Gargano lad? He's fairly cheap, he just wants a bit of experience, he's a good wrestler, he's got a good reputation on the indie scene, do you want to book him? And I was like, who is he? And he sent across his picture, Johnny Gargano, and I says, no disrespect whatsoever, Ben, who's the promoter from Stevenage, Ben. I says, like, I've never heard of him, I don't think he'll draw me a crowd, and Russell's almost sold out anyway, so there's no need for me to bring anybody in. It's practically sold out on its own, which it has tonight, actually. We've got like 245 tickets reserved for it so far, you know, so if we get 100 walk up, we full, you know, which I think we will be. And the show was ticking along nicely, pre-sales were massive, and I was confident the show would sell out anyway, so I says thank you, but no thank you. I was respectful, but I says, look, I've never heard of him, you know, and even if I had heard of him, the show will be a sellout anyway, so don't worry about it, kind of thing. I hope he gets some work, and he did, and he filled his tour up, because other promoters were far more knowledgeable than me and had their finger far more on the pulse than me, and knew that he was an amazing talent, and they booked him and I didn't. And then I think maybe a week and a half before the show, sorry, the first phone call would have been about a month before, then about a week and a half before the show, Ben got in touch again, and he said the promoter who had him booked for that Friday has pulled out, he's had to cancel the show for XYZ reason, do you want to book him? He's got his deposit paid from the other promoter, so it'll be half of the fee that I quoted you a week and a half ago. And I was like, no, still no deal. That we've sold even more tickets in the last week and a half. I don't need him, you know. Don't worry about it. Like, then a week before the show, Ben got in touch again, and he says, like, you sure you don't want to use him, because he's very, very talented, and I think you'll thank me, and he just wants every date filled. And the promoter, he says, you know, we'll cover some of the costs with a meet and greet, or if you can let him do a meet and greet or something like that, we can do it for X figure. And whatever X figure was, it was very, very reasonable. I don't want to tell tales out of school, because let's face it, he's been wrestling in the WWE for the last X amount of years. He's probably a multi-millionaire now. He don't care about me telling this story. He won't care. He just wanted to wrestle, and fair fucks to him. He's a very, very good wrestler. But I eventually come up with a price that, you know, wasn't going to affect my bottom line as a promoter, because it was important for me. I don't promote Mickey Mouse. I don't promote for fun. I promote to pay my bills, you know what I mean? It pays my rent and my gas and my electric, and it feeds my kids and it clothes my kids. So I have to run PWL as a business, and if something doesn't warrant the outlay, I can't do it. And that's not me being a prick. I'm not a money mark. I don't promote for the sake of it. And if a show's not making money, I don't want to run it. Whether it be the venue paying me to put that show on, or a show that I put on with good ticket sales. Other than that, I don't want to know. But Ben worked with me, and he made a few compromises, and I made a few compromises, and in the end we booked Johnny Gargano. And then I'm like, oh God, who can he wrestle? And I said to Ben, what, you know, how tall is he? And he's the same height as me. And I says, how much does he weigh? And he's the same weight as me. And I says, well, what's he wrestle like? And he says, oh, he's very, very technical. You'll like him. He can fly about, but he's a good, solid technical wrestler. Oh, all right then, my size, my weight, apparently can wrestle technical. Let's find out. You know, so I booked him against myself without really thinking about it. And about a week out before the show, I advertised him, and the 50 tickets that were left on general sale at that point, they sold like that. Boof. They just sold. I thought, oh, fucking hell. You know, I might not have heard of him, but 50 people have. To sell out, you know, to sell 50 tickets overnight, and 50 people have heard of him casually from that area, which means I would have sold more tickets if I had more time, but it sold out, so who cares? You know, it don't matter. It sold out anyway. But obviously he was a bigger name than I thought he was. And I thought he was this nobody kid from America, you know. And he arrived backstage, lovely, lovely, lovely man, you know, really nice, unassuming, quiet kid. I gathered that he'd been the babyface on that tour, but, you know, again, thinking business-wise, I'm the babyface, you know, I'm the hero at PWL. So I walk up to him, and I wasn't quite so much, hello kid, how you doing? I wasn't patronising or anything like that, but I certainly didn't treat him like a superstar. But then again, I don't treat any of them like that. I treat them fairly and with respect, but I treat them how they treat me. So I just walked up to him, shook his hand, introduced myself, got to make sure he was okay, see if he needed anything. And I was like, oh, by the way, do you mind, you know, working villain tonight? You know, we'll do this X, Y and Z. And he was up for it, and he took everything in his stride. We didn't plan much because I was busy promoting the show and making sure everything else was okay. Our music's hit, we got in the ring, and he was one of the best wrestlers I'd been in the ring with to that date. And I completely understand why the WWE signed him, and I understand why he's been the NXT champion and the North American champion and the NXT tag champion. I know he's held all them 3 belts because I've got him on my Twitter, and he took a picture of all those 3 belts in his house the other day on Twitter, so I thought that was pretty cool. I thought, oh yeah, I wrestled you in Rush Hall. But it was just funny because the morning of the show I'd never heard of him, almost to the point of disrespect. And then within months he was in WWE having like 5-star matches and having the best matches on the card and stealing these takeover shows they do. So that was pretty cool. And I know it's a bit of a weird story because now, with how much of a name he is now, you might be thinking, Mad Dog, how the fuck did you not know who Johnny Gargano was? But my finger weren't on the pulse, was it, you know? But I soon found out within 2 minutes of locking up with him and taking hold and just going backwards and forwards. I knew he was brilliant. So Gargano gets on the list without a shadow of a doubt. Another man that I cannot talk about my career without, I can't even think of talking about, was his Red Eagle from Portugal. One of my favourite opponents. Very similar thought process in regards to wrestling to myself. We're very, very alike in what we think about wrestling, what we want to get out of wrestling, what we believe wrestling is. We're very, very similar in that regard. He's a bit more flashy and high-flying than me, but fundamentally he's a technical wrestler, and he's a damn good technical wrestler as well. But when I first met him, he could only speak about 3 words of English, and he turned up to one of my shows in Warsaw, asked for an opportunity. I think he was finding it hard getting work because he could hardly speak English, and I gave him an opportunity that night. I wrestled him again. I'd never heard of him, and I didn't want the lads to wrestle someone unsafe. So I thought, well, if he's crap, I'm the promoter, I can just put a shoot hold on and finish it in 2 minutes, and it's no skin off my nose, you know. I didn't care. So I wrestled him, and 2 minutes went by, 3 minutes went by, 15 minutes went by, and we had a good bout. Not the best bout ever, because he wasn't as polished as he is now, but he was still, you could see there was makings of a very, very good wrestler. And in his broken English, he says, he was very bad English, I can't do it justice. He speaks great English now, does Eagle, but in his very bad English, he said basically, thank you, you've just given me my first wrestling opportunity in England, I'll never ever forget that. My dream is to start promoting in Portugal, and if I can run the shows to a good standard, I'd like to bring you to Portugal. And I just thought, yeah, whatever kid, whatever, you know. You hear a lot of promises and a lot of tours, and oh, we'll be wrestling in Israel next week, or we'll go to Germany next week, I've got a contact, and they never come true, you know. Oh yeah, I'll get you wrestling there, kid, or I'll get you wrestling there, kid, and it never materialises, you know, never. And believe it or not, 2 or 3 years later, he carried on wrestling all over Europe, and he got his experience up a bit. He started his promotion, and lo and behold, he got in touch, fancy that match in Portugal, and I've been wrestling there ever since. And the biggest thing I'll say about that, although it's not the in-ring stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute, he's a complete man of his word. He's a man of his word. He told me that if he started promoting properly in Portugal, he'd bring me. I never thought another second of it, and he brought me, and then he brought me again and again and again, and he trusted me. And I'm the CTW champion now. He's promotion in Portugal, and I've had endless opportunities because of him and his promotion in Portugal, and because of his belief in me. Much like I would say Taffy Jenkins had belief in me, and like JD Knight had belief in me, and Carlos had belief in me, and Scrubber Daly has belief in me. Believe it or not, I've only wrestled against Scrubber Daly about 3 times, so I'll wrestle him a few more times before I talk to you about him. But in regards as a mentor and whatnot, he believed in me as well. But going back to Red, going back to Red, yeah, he believes in me, and yeah, I've got a lot of opportunities because of that first match I had with him. But off the back of that first match, we wrestled the second time, a third time. I've probably wrestled him over 100 times now. And not only that, Red got a tour of Japan. As you will know, he's wrestled there a bunch of times, and the match that he sent to all these promotions to get his work out there was a match against me. And once he'd done a tour there, they were like, you know, who's that guy in the tape? And a lot of wrestlers would be like, oh, don't worry about it, you know, don't worry about it, because wrestlers like to be successful, and they like you to be successful, but they don't like you to be as successful as them. You know, a lot of wrestlers are selfish, which I get, you know, it's show business and it's competitive and all of that, I understand, but Red Eagle's far from selfish. And that, like I say, the match that he used to get out to Japan was a match against me, and it was one of our more technical matches, and one of the matches that I'm very proud of. If you want to watch the particular match I'm talking about, drop me a message, I'll send you the link. But you know, when they asked about me, Red didn't shut up about me, and that just shows you what a good friend he is, and what an unselfish person he is, and also how much he believes in me, because if I'd have gone out there and messed it up, it'd look bad on him, you know. He hadn't got his feet under the table there yet, he'd only wrestled there once, one tour, you know, and then before I know it, I'm wrestling out there. So thank you for the biggest opportunity in my career, Red, I appreciate it. But going back to the opponent, which is what this podcast's about, Red Eagle, quite simply put, is one of my favourite opponents. There's no villain, there's no hero. We just shake hands backstage, we walk to the ring, we shake hands when the bell rings, and we wrestle. And when I say wrestle, I mean we get on the mat and we wrestle. And unashamedly, he's one of my favourite opponents. And I've wrestled him 100 times, and I hope I wrestle him 1,000 more. He's a dream to wrestle against. And while we're talking about Japan, another of my favourite opponents is Tamura. I wrestled him a bunch in Japan, wrestled him a bunch here. He's the PWL World's Wrestling Champion. He was the first PWL World's Wrestling Champion. He beat me in Warsaw, the bastard. He beat me for it in a tournament final. I was very proud of that tournament. It was a true international tournament to crown a true world champion. You had a Portuguese wrestler in Red Eagle. You had an American wrestler in Kevin Phoenix. You had me being English, and you had Tamura being Japanese. And the four of us represented four corners of the globe, and we wrestled in a knockout tournament. And Tamura took the belt. Like I say, I've wrestled him here. I've wrestled him in Japan. And he's a joy to work. Similar size to me, similar weight. Very much, again, like Red, he likes his technical wrestling. And again, there's no clear-cut bad guy, no clear-cut hero. We shake hands before backstage when no one can see us. We both walk to the ring, the music plays, we shake hands again, the bell rings, and we go, and we just go. And he's just fantastic, really. Just fantastic, and I can't say enough about him. His tournament final against me, I absolutely adored. And the match I had against him in Tokyo, it was over 45 minutes. It was very, very technical. I got streamers thrown at me, which made me cry like a baby. And we had a standing ovation at the end. He's quite simply one of the best wrestlers going. And he's just wrestling for All Japan, I think, this weekend. And he'll be back over here as soon as the travel restrictions allow. And I'll be going back over there. And I hope to wrestle him many, many more times. Another wrestler that would be remiss of me to include would be Chris Royals. Great wrestler, come on a lot. I've kind of took him under my wing. There was already a very, very talented wrestler in there, but personally I think it needed just refining a little bit, just sanding off a bit of the rough edges, then a bit of glass paper to make a bit of them surfaces a little bit shinier. And I think that I've achieved a little bit of that with him, because I just saw a diamond in the rough in him, a really, really good wrestler who just needed a little bit of spit and polish, not a lot. And then he was promoting a really, really big show in London. And I just got back from my first tour of Japan. I was in phenomenal shape, which I'm working to get back to, by the way. I'm back on the diet. Lockdown weight be gone. I was in phenomenal shape, and it was a big deal for him to be promoting in London. And he got in touch with me and he asked me if I'd wrestle against him in London. It was a British rules match, rounds, 2 falls to a finish, one of my favourite realms, if you want, one of my favourite disciplines to wrestle in, and he trusted me. And again, he had faith in me, and there's probably a reoccurring theme here, because those wrestlers that have a bit of faith in me, it means that I believe in myself more, and I give them that little bit more of me. And that match in London I'll never forget. It was quite special for me to go back to London after many years of not wrestling there. I'd read a book that Bob Barrett gave me called Blue Blood on the Mat, which detailed a lot of the early wrestling in London in the 20s and 30s, and then after the war and things like that. So London meant a little bit more to me after I'd stopped wrestling there. So to go back there and wrestle in a British rules match after reading that Blue Blood on the Mat book, again, amazing book. If you want to know the proper title and who it's by and all that, drop me a message, I'll send you the details. But to go and wrestle Chris in that rounds match was phenomenal. And to come full circle, to tell you, wrestling Cade Callis and Matt Mentor was one of the first 2 wrestlers that I'd helped coach. To wrestle them was a different feeling. Well, to wrestle your Cal Silvers, who I love wrestling. Cal's like a troubleshooter, like a fire marshal at PWL. A main event goes wrong, I wrestle him. Somebody pulls out, I wrestle him. Your Cal Silvers, your Danny Golds, who I've wrestled many times. Cal and Danny are funny, because when I first started wrestling them, I hated wrestling against them, because they were clumsy and they were young and they were dumb, like I was clumsy and young and dumb. And Bob took a bit of mercy on me. I perhaps didn't take the same mercy on them, and they made the mistakes and they hurt me a few times, so I'll give them a few cracks. But it was nice to see them grow into young men and to become capable wrestlers, and to go from giving them just cracks all match to having good solid bouts with them that I was proud of. I've got to include them. Two wrestlers I must include as well are Leo Addison and Johnny Thunder. Again, two lads that, you know, I helped coach and joined PWL from scratch. A little bit different to Cal and Dan. Cal and Dan started out like me, young, dumb, full of cum, stupid and clumsy and a little bit big-headed, which they've both overcome. Cal's still a little bit big-headed, but I love him for it. And they went on a similar journey to me. A little bit different. Johnny Thunder and Leo Addison and Johnny Thunder, they were a little bit older when they started, so they were already mature. They were already street smart and street wise, so they were a joy to coach from the start. And although they were green at the start, they were a joy to wrestle from the start. They were a joy. But they belong on the list too, for very different reasons. I'll have very different matches with all four of the wrestlers I've just mentioned: Danny Gold, Cal Silver, Leo Addison, Johnny Thunder, all very, very different reasons. And like I say, Alan and Johnny, Leo Addison and Johnny, I keep calling them by their work, their shoot names. Alan's Leo Addison and Jamie's Johnny Thunder. I'll give it away now, sorry lads. Everyone's got you on Facebook, it don't fucking matter. They were already very mature and already very, very street smart, so they were easier to teach, and they were calmer in matches because they were that bit older. So I started having better matches with them straight away. They were green at first, but the matches got better and better and better, and now they're both fully qualified professional wrestlers, and I love wrestling them. They're amazing, you know, they're brilliant. Yeah, lads, you're fantastic, all four of you I've just mentioned, really. I just, you know, whenever my name's next to yours, I'm quite happy, you know. Tiger Singh comes into that same bracket. I've told this story many times, so I'll just tell it really quick. In that, you know, he pestered me. He lived a couple of streets down from me, and he pestered me to teach him, but I didn't want to be a coach at that point in my life, and I only opened the PWL wrestling school just so I could shut him up, because he pestered me so much. And although he was very young, Aaron had a more mature head on him. He's always been very mature, and he went from this green young punk to a lad that I love to wrestle. And there would be no PWL school without Aaron, Tiger Singh. There might not even be a promotion without him. So I've got to put him on the list. But a match that we had at Warsaw, Bescott, a technical wrestling match, one of the best I've ever had technically, and people still talk about it now, and we ain't wrestled each other for years. So there's got to be something in that, you know. And who I'll end it on, and I'm so sorry if I've left you off the list, but anybody who I've trained and wrestled, I'm proud of each and every single one of you, whether we talk now or whether we don't. You know, I'm proud of those good moments we had. For the other moments, fuck yeah. But I'll end it on Leon Jackson, really. Similar story to the other lads, but even more poignant, because he started watching us when he was 8. Well, younger than that, he was 6, I think, when he started watching the shows, and he'd be on the front row up and down like a jumping bean. And soon he was old enough, he joined our kids' class. He was 8, and he was a fucking nightmare. He was naughty, and he wouldn't keep still, you know, and he was a fucking nightmare. And he went from being a nightmare to a talented young nightmare, who was decent, little young wrestler. Then he went from being a talented nightmare to being a talented, well-mannered, well-rounded human being. I'm proud to say that, you know, I was his mum and dad said I was the first teacher, including his school teachers and football coaches and all that. I was the first teacher he ever listened to, so that's a big honour. And I'm now his godfather and all of that. And there's no bias me putting him on this list because of that. The journey that we went on warrants me talking about him at least. You know, little nightmare in the front row, then a little nightmare in kids' class, then a talented nightmare, and then just a wonderful human being who's also one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever had the privilege to coach, tag with, or wrestle against. But if you want to know why he's one of my favourite opponents, just go on my Facebook account, and there's 2 versions of this. Find the one with the commentary, it's better quality footage. I should take the one off without the commentary, really. But if you don't hear Cal commentating 2 or 3 minutes in, put the other one on. But I wrestled him for 93 minutes, solid, the longest match I've ever had, 2 falls to a finish. It was a tribute tournament to another man that was on this list, Taffy Jenkins, bless him. And Taffy had just started coaching at PWL before he'd passed away. So Leon knew him and he coached all of us, and I wouldn't be the wrestler I am today without anybody on this list, but obviously Taffy, because I've got to mention him because he's mentioned twice now. But me and Leon got to the final of the tribute tournament, and we dedicated the whole tournament to him. And Taffy instilled in me certain values in wrestling, and certain things you couldn't get away with, and certain things you couldn't do. And in that 90-minute match, I applied everything he ever taught me. And if Leon wasn't one of my best opponents, I couldn't have done it, because it takes 2 to tango. Take 3 after, actually, because we had one of the best referees in there as well, Steve Walker. Shout out to you, pal, because we needed you in that match. But honestly, if you want to know why Leon's one of my favourite opponents, just watch that match and you'll understand, and watch it till the end and watch me break down in tears. I'm not just in tears because I miss Taffy. I'm in tears because I realised I took every little bit of his education and every bit that he was pointing me towards in those early years. I applied him in one single match and I made it work. It was against my godson, my trainee, that little nightmare who used to be in the front row, that little nightmare who used to do my head in kids class, and he'd become one of my greatest opponents. So watch that match and tell me it's not emotional at the end. Tell me it's not one of the most technical matches you've ever seen. And yeah, that's it really. I'm going to wind this podcast up now. I'll end it on that I've had a very, very fortunate career. I've been wrestling for 21 years. I want 21 more, or 42 more, or whatever my body lets me have, or my lifespan lets me have. I've probably left a lot of people off this list, but please understand, I'm driving a truck, I'm driving home, I can't read me notes, and I'm sure I've left great talented wrestlers off. But if I've ever stepped in the ring with you, if I've ever been near you backstage, I wouldn't be who I am now, love you or hate you, without your influence, good or bad. So if I've left you off, I apologise. There's probably another 100 wrestlers who deserve to be on the list, who dragged me through matches, who looked after me, who taught me, who just treated me good. And all the wrestlers who didn't treat me so good, you still taught me how to deal with dickheads. So thank you, you wankers. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, folks. I love you all. I'll see you tonight at Rush Hall, even though you're watching this tomorrow on Saturday. I'll see you at the end of the month for Halloween special shows. Bilston Labour Club, Bilston Sports and Social Club, Saturday 30th of October. Kingshurst Labour Club, Solihull, Birmingham on Sunday the 31st of October, Halloween afternoon show. I'll see you all. I love you all. Ta-ra!